Head. This morning you probably stepped into a car, turned a key or pressed a button, touched a pedal, and moved at 40 miles an hour with almost no physical effort. 100,000 years ago. Head. Covering the same distance might have required 2 exhausting days on foot, across rough ground where there were no roads, no signs, and no guarantee of what waited beyond the next hill. Head. For nearly all of human history, travel was never a casual part of the day. Going somewhere meant exposing yourself to weather, hunger, injury, predators, and unfamiliar territory. Head. There was no machine to carry you and no map to guide you. There were only your legs, your memory, and whatever knowledge other people had shared with you. Today, a person can cross the planet in less than a day. Head. An object made on the far side of the world can arrive at your front door. Transportation has become so easy that we barely notice it. Yet for most of the roughly 300,000 years that Homo sapiens has existed. Head. Human movement happened at the speed of a walking person. That single limit influenced where people lived, what they could eat, whom they met, whom they married, and how much of the world they could ever know. Head. Welcome to Mr. Bip, where we uncover the remarkable story of ancient human life and survival. If you enjoy discovering how ordinary inventions transformed our species, subscribe to the channel. Head. Leave a like, and tell us in the comments which ancient breakthrough you would have wanted to witness. To understand this story, we have to begin with the first transportation system humans ever possessed. Head. The human body. We are not the fastest creatures on Earth. A cheetah can briefly reach around 70 miles per hour. A horse can maintain impressive speed over long stretches. Head. A human may sprint at roughly 15 miles per hour for only a short time before needing to slow down. But speed was never our greatest advantage. Endurance was. A healthy person can walk 20 miles in a day. Head. Rest and repeat the journey the next morning. Under the right conditions, people can continue doing this for days or even weeks. Our feet have arches that help absorb impact and return energy. Head. The Achilles tendon stretches and releases like a spring with every stride. A ligament at the back of the neck helps stabilize the head while the body moves, and millions of sweat glands allow us to release heat efficiently. Head. Humans were not designed to win a short race against a horse. We evolved into unusually persistent travelers. In 1978, a team led by paleoanthropologist Mary Leakey uncovered an extraordinary trail at Laetoli in Tanzania. Head. The footprints had been pressed into wet volcanic ash about 3.6 million years ago, and then preserved when the ash hardened. They record early human relatives moving upright, including individuals who appear to have walked together. Head. The prints are among the oldest and clearest surviving trails of habitual bipedal walking, and their basic pattern looks surprisingly familiar. For millions of years, walking remained the foundation of human transportation. Head. It was slow, but it eventually carried our ancestors farther than any other land species had spread by deliberate movement and adaptation. Major migrations of Homo sapiens out of Africa accelerated roughly 70,000 years ago. Head. This was not a single heroic march made by one group. It unfolded over thousands of years as generations of people moved gradually into new landscapes. Small communities crossed parts of the Middle East. Head. Expanded through Asia, entered Europe, adapted to the cold of Siberia, and eventually reached the Americas by routes that included the region of Beringia. Head. Their descendants continued south until human communities occupied lands separated from Africa by thousands upon thousands of miles. These people were not simply wandering without purpose. Head. Archaeologists have uncovered obsidian artifacts far from the volcanoes where the stone originated. Marine shells have been discovered deep inland, while amber and other valuable materials traveled across mountains and between distant communities. Head. Such finds reveal networks of exchange. People move to obtain resources, meet neighboring groups, maintain alliances, and follow information passed from one community to another. Head. Long before roads or written addresses, humans were building social networks on foot. Walking, however, has an obvious weakness. A person can cross open grassland, follow a valley. Head. Climb a pass, or even survive a desert route with enough knowledge and preparation. But deep water can turn a path into a dead end. Rivers divided hunting grounds and migration corridors. Head. Lakes blocked direct routes, seas separated entire regions. For a land traveler, water was often a wall unless there was a shallow ford or a safe way around it, at some unknown point. Head. An early human discovered that the wall could be crossed. Stone tools found on floors in Indonesia show that ancient hominins reached the island at least hundreds of thousands of years ago. Head. Flores was separated from neighboring land even when Ice Age sea levels were lower. The exact route, the size of the water gaps, and the method of travel remain debated, but the archaeological evidence tells us that a crossing occurred. Head. Any raft, log platform, or bamboo craft used at the time would have decayed long ago. The earliest flotation devices may have been extremely simple. A fallen tree, several pieces of wood joined together. Head. Or bundles of reeds. Perhaps the idea began as a discovery rather than a carefully planned invention. Someone noticed that wood floated, trusted it far enough to cross a stream. Head. And learned that water did not always have to stop the journey. Later crossings required something more deliberate. By at least around 65,000 years ago, modern humans had reached Sahul. Head. The Ice Age landmass that included Australia and New Guinea. Reaching it from Southeast Asia required crossing multiple stretches of open water. Researchers continue to debate the precise routes, and whether every voyage was intentional. But simple watercraft and coordinated travel were almost certainly involved. Groups had to leave familiar ground and move toward land that was not always visible from where they began. That decision is difficult to imagine. A small group pushed away from the shore in a craft made from perishable materials. Behind them was the only solid ground they knew. Ahead of them was open water. Uncertainty, and perhaps nothing more than clues from birds, clouds, currents, or stories carried by earlier travelers. The oldest surviving boat discovered so far is often identified as the Pest canoe from the Netherlands. Made about 10,000 years ago from a hollowed tree trunk, but a surviving boat is not the same as the first boat. Wood disappears. Evidence of much older island settlement shows that watercraft technology must reach far deeper into the past than the few ancient vessels that archaeology has preserved, thousands of years later. Austronesian and Polynesian navigators developed ocean travel into one of humanity's greatest systems of knowledge. Beginning roughly 3,000 years ago, voyagers expanded across the Pacific. The largest ocean on Earth. They used sophisticated canoes, including double-hulled vessels, and transported food, plants, animals, tools, and whole communities. They navigated without modern charts or magnetic compasses. Instead, they read the rising and setting positions of stars, the direction of ocean swells, the flight of birds, reflections beneath clouds, winds, currents, and other patterns that most people today would never notice. With knowledge preserved and taught across generations, Polynesian voyagers reached Hawaii, Rapa Nui, Aotearoa, New Zealand, and distant islands scattered across an enormous ocean. Some journeys extended for thousands of miles with little or no land in between. Walking opened the continents, boats opened the water, yet another limit remained: weight. A person might walk 20 miles. But that same person could not easily carry a 200-pound animal, a large supply of wood, or an entire family's belongings across the same distance, for much of prehistory. Transportation was limited less by how far the body could travel than by how much it could carry. A heavy load of 40 to 60 pounds can quickly turn a manageable journey into a punishing one. One early solution was to stop lifting and start dragging. A heavy object could be placed on a hide, mat, or wooden support and pulled toward camp. Direct archaeological evidence for such perishable devices is scarce. So their earliest dates are uncertain, but the principle is simple and appears in many societies. A more efficient version was the travois, 2 long poles arranged as a frame. With a platform or netting between them. The joined end could be pulled while the trailing ends slid over the ground and supported the cargo. This spread the load and allowed one person, or later an animal, to move far more than could comfortably be carried on the back. Because wood, leather, and plant fiber decay, ancient examples rarely survive. Much of our understanding comes from later historical and indigenous use. Especially in North America. The next great advance was not simply an object, it was a relationship with another species. Dogs were the first animals domesticated by humans. With a partnership that reaches back at least 15,000 years, and possibly much earlier. They helped people hunt, guarded camps, offered warmth and companionship, and in some regions eventually hauled cargo. Across the Arctic, sled dogs became essential transportation partners. A trained team could pull supplies, tools, shelters, and family possessions over snow and ice that made wheeled travel almost impossible. Dogs were powerful for their size, but humans eventually formed working relationships with much larger animals. On the steppe of what is now Kazakhstan, the bowtie culture was managing horses around 5,500 years ago. Archaeologists have found chemical traces consistent with mare's milk in pottery, and changes on some horse teeth once interpreted as evidence of bits, exactly when people first rode horses. And how the domestication of modern horses developed remain subjects of debate. What is certain is that once riding and horse-powered transport spread widely, the scale of human movement changed dramatically. For almost the entire existence of our species, ordinary travel on land had remained close to walking speed, perhaps 3 or 4 miles per hour. A horse could move several times faster and carry a rider much farther in a day. Distances that once demanded weeks could sometimes be crossed in days. News traveled faster, trade networks expanded, pastoral communities could move with their herds. And mounted forces changed warfare by arriving with speed that people on foot could not match. Different environments produced different animal partnerships. Donkeys carried goods through dry and rocky country. Camels supported routes across deserts. Reindeer pulled sleds in northern regions. Llamas transported cargo through the Andes, wherever people settled. They learned which animals could survive the local landscape and how those animals could extend human strength. Even then, one famous invention was still missing: the wheel. It feels as if the wheel should have appeared near the beginning of transportation history. But humans crossed seas and settled distant islands long before wheeled vehicles existed. One of the best preserved early wooden wheel and axle finds comes from the Ljubljana Marshes in Slovenia and is about 5,200 years old. Watercraft are far older, and long-distance seafaring began tens of thousands of years earlier. Head. Rotating devices were also used to shape pottery during the broad era in which wheeled transport emerged. The familiar idea that someone simply turned a potter's wheel on its side is a useful story. Head. But archaeology cannot identify one inventor or prove that the cart developed in exactly that way. Head. What the evidence does show is that communities eventually learned to place a load above a rotating axle and reduce the friction that had always made dragging so difficult. The earliest vehicle wheels were solid. Head. Thick and heavy. They worked on firm, reasonably level ground, but performed badly in deep mud and across broken terrain. Without a suitable path, a cart could become a burden instead of an advantage. Head. A rider on horseback was often faster. By the second millennium BC, spoked wheels had made vehicles lighter while preserving strength. Chariots combined animal power with speed and mobility. Head. Roads, prepared tracks, bridges, and paved urban routes developed into increasingly connected infrastructure. When animals, wheels, and reliable roads worked together, transportation became a system rather than a collection of isolated inventions. Head. Trade increased because larger quantities of food, metal, pottery, timber, and other goods could travel farther. States could supply distant settlements. Armies could move equipment and provisions across long routes. Head. Cities became connected to farms, mines, ports, and other cities. The combination of animal power, wheeled vehicles, and roads helped support many of the civilizations and empires remembered today. Head. Now step back and look at the whole journey. For most of human existence, our legs did nearly everything. On foot, people spread across the planet when water blocked the route. Head. They learned to float and then to navigate. When loads became too heavy, they dragged them and built frames to distribute the weight. They partnered with dogs and larger animals. Head. Horses accelerated movement across land. Wheels reduced friction, and roads allowed the different technologies to work together. None of these changes appeared overnight. Each was built on countless observations. Head. Experiments, failures, and lessons passed from one generation to the next. A simple solution to one problem created the foundation for a more ambitious solution centuries or millennia later. Head. Today you can sit inside a metal vehicle and travel 70 miles per hour on a paved highway, then describe the trip as an ordinary commute. You can fly 3,000 miles across an ocean in 6 hours and feel annoyed because the Wi-Fi is slow. Head. A device in your pocket can summon a car to your exact location, and a delay of 1 minute can feel inconvenient. Our ancestors crossed continents they could not name and moved toward places they had never seen. Head. They traveled because climates shifted, resources changed, communities grew, curiosity pulled them onward, and survival often depended on finding what lay beyond the horizon. Head. Humanity solved the problem of distance so thoroughly that modern life makes it easy to forget distance was ever a problem at all. Every highway, airport, port. Head. And railway is part of a story that began long before metal engines and paved streets, with an ancestor standing upright, looking toward the horizon, and taking another step. They did not always know where the path would lead. Head. They moved forward anyway. And perhaps that is one of the most human things of all. If this journey changed the way you think about transportation, subscribe to Mr. Bip for more stories about ancient history. Head. Archaeology, and the inventions that shaped human life. Share the video with someone who loves the past, and comment below. Which mattered more, the boat, the horse, or the wheel?